Hi, everyone. If you're joining us, thank you so much for your patience and apologies that we're running a bit late, a little bit behind schedule today. Um, we've had some technological issues because Alexis is coming to us from a location other than her home. And I've just tuned in with Alexis, who joins us now by FaceTime, and there she is. Everyone can see you.
Hello, everybody. Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So this is just us improvising and finding a different way of doing things. But today we're going to be talking about one of the four F's of survival, which is fawning, which is different to the other three, which is freeze, fight, and flight. Now I'm going to see if I can't do something tricky here where we can both be on the screen somehow, Alexis. I don't think it's going to happen. I
That,
think I think we're just going to have you on audio and I can hold you up to the screen to say goodbye.
that is perfect. Perfect. So, Rachel, would you mind sharing with us how you came to this topic today, the relevance of it, um, it as it's come into contact with you?
Yeah, thanks for that good question, Alexis. Excuse me. Well, I saw an article which I didn't read, but the title of the article was Are you an empath or are you having a trauma response? And I really thought about this as, you know, something that I talk with my clients about sometimes because I have had clients in my office say, "Oh, I think I'm just an empath. I feel other people's feelings." This is something I've heard people say to me a bit over the years. I really feel other people's feelings. And
Okay.
I
Yeah,
wondered
go on.
if that's a thing, whether you can actually feel other people's feelings or whether we can only feel our own feelings. So what's really going on when people say that they're highly sensitive people, that they're empaths, and they can, feel other people's energy. So I'm really curious about what is going on and when does empathy tip over into trying to sort of keep the peace, please others, this fawning response. And how do we tell the difference between genuine empathy and our attempts to kind of fix things, make them right, or please the other person? And, I've got some ideas about how we can tell the difference in ourselves.
Thank you for raising this really important topic because I think many who are drawn to psychology and yoga, drawn to therapy, will be inclined towards feeling and sensitivity, but potentially fawning. And it's very relevant for me um, because being a naturopath, I'm not under the same ethic that you are as a psychologist, and I've noticed a tendency to build friendships with my clients, which in some ways I think is natural, but I can really see the value, having worked with you, Rachel, in not doing that. So to be able to distinguish for myself, when am I, bringing compassion versus when am I going over that line and trying to appeal to someone, through a more personal connection. I think that's a very, very relevant question and will probably pertain to many people across all different professions because we all could. I mean, especially I can understand it also in a romantic context, or even if not necessarily romantic, but in a subtler form of using charm or using qualities that are not based on my competence or my professionalism to achieve an outcome. And whilst, again, I think there's something that's quite natural about these social engagements,
Yes.
to be able to distinguish and to regulate and to use it constructively would be a skill that certainly I would really get value from. So please share all your insights. We would love to hear more.
Well, I really like what you've just said about, when do these tactics of grace and charm and social skills, when do they slip over into, managing the impression that to what degree are we managing other people's perceptions of us and trying to avoid conflict, which is a very natural kind of or normal thing to do for human beings.
Okay, so you're talking specifically about avoiding situations of conflict. I was thinking more about using those qualities to achieve a personal outcome, like, business development, for example.
Yep. Well, I mean, I guess that's another way of another strategy for getting our needs met and reducing anxiety around financial security. I mean, there's many needs that could be met in using some sophisticated or unsophisticated type of fawning behavior. And I think for me, to get to the crux of this question and this topic, for me, it's the test is in the body. And before I say more about why the test is in the body, I want to say that we can often be having a hybrid response to something. By hybrid, I mean, we can genuinely have empathy for somebody, genuinely love them or care about them, and be doing some fawning and be doing some fixing and some impression management, which is more of a survival tactic or a defense mechanism. So it's not black and white.
Yes, that's what makes it so interesting, that it is grey and all the more worthy of exploration. I'm aware that our listeners may not be familiar with the term fawning, and in fact I'd love to hear your definition and understanding of.
Okay, well before I talk about the test being in the body, which is sort of the punchline of the whole live stream, before I give away the punchline too much more, when a child is young and he or she senses that the other parent is dysregulated, so one of their parents is dysregulated, or an adult, could be a teacher, and they pick up on the child, the child picks up on the parent's distress, dysregulation, and most children are fairly attuned to the emotional environment before they're really able to think too much about it intellectually. When the child picks up on the fact that their parent is stressed, angry, very anxious, the child starts to feel stressed and anxious. And as a survival response, the child will try and figure out what he or she can do to keep the peace, to fix it, to make it right, or to keep the parent happy. Now, all of us would have had some experience of this with one of our parents to some degree. Like, how do I make mum happy? How do I be good? How do I make it right? How do I fix this? And how do I keep the peace? Now, if this happens occasionally, that's not a big deal. But if this becomes a chronic situation where the child then falls into the role of peacekeeper, or being the good child in some way, the high achiever, the one who maybe is the mediator. There's lots of ways in which children can fall into roles in their family. But these are the fawning roles. Fawning just means, trying to make everyone happy or trying to fix things. And it's not the child's job to fix the emotions of the adult. That obviously goes without saying. But children will try and do this as a survival tactic. This is a defense mechanism that children will do as unconsciously as the fight response, the flight response, or the freeze response. So it's called the fourth F of survival. And I posted that earlier today. And we don't talk about it very much because it actually can just look like personality. It can just look like the personality of the child or the adult, when in fact, this is why people sort of label themselves, I'm an empath. That's sort of, they're saying that's their personality. And I'm just questioning, yeah, maybe, yeah, that is something we can vary on a continuum, like any personality trait. Some people are naturally quite empathic, more so than others perhaps. But the question is, could it be a trauma response or some sort of survival tactic to be so attuned to other people's feelings? Because if you weren't as a child, you might have copped it. Life could have been worse if you weren't tuned into the adult's feelings. So you learned to be very tuned in to the other people's feelings to try and survive. It's a survival tactic.
And so are you talking about those behaviours like people pleasing, where I might be compromising my sense of self for somebody else? I mean, as we've been saying all along, interaction, interdependence, attachment, they're all healthy responses. But when it's at the expense of the sense of self, that sounds like that may be the defining feature of fawning. Does that resonate for you, Rachel?
At the expense of self, that's right. We know we're fawning because we may not know we're doing it, but whether we know it or not, we're denying some aspect of our own reality. We're denying some of our own feelings or our own needs in order to make it right, fix it, or keep the peace. So there's absolutely some element of self-denial in there.
Okay, and so what may be denied, what may be compromised? The sense of self, but ultimately it sounds like then some form of development or growth of the individual may be the cost of pleasing the parent or acting in a way that is to appease the parents rather than what the child really needs to be doing at that stage of life. What else can you see as particularly the long-term ramifications of a habit of fawning?
Well, I think fawning often goes with one of the other F's of survival. So, and the main one that comes to my mind is freeze. So we freeze our own feelings and freeze our own deeper needs in order to keep up the persona of the good one, the responsible one, or the high achieving one. And so these survival responses can go together, and I think the freeze response goes very well with the fawn response. Sadly, I'm not really smiling because that's a good thing. It's often later in adulthood that we realize, I've been suppressing aspects of myself. I've lost certain aspects of myself in an attempt to be liked by everyone, keep the peace, make other people happy. And this is very common. In fact, this is the least acknowledged survival strategy of the 4Fs because it's the most common one and we take it for granted.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I recognise the freeze response in terms of functionality. If I'm really under pressure, I freeze. My functioning freezes, but I hadn't heard about it in terms of freezing my contact with my emotions. That's new for me too.
And Stephanie's just mentioned that this was her early experience, and it was due to her need for safety, and that's often how it is. And Joe's just made the point that we're trying to regulate the other. The child is trying to regulate the adult, which is, or their siblings, in order to regulate the adult, in order that the the parent doesn't get too dysregulated. And we must always honor anything that's a survival strategy, because it can't be bad if it's trying to help us survive. We just need to look at the cost that it comes with over time. And usually this is a safety thing, as Stephanie's pointed out. Children are just trying to stay safe and trying to stay in the tribe and trying to fit in.
Yes. As a visual symbol, which may be helpful for our listeners, the image that's occurring to me is that the figure of eight. We've often spoken about NVC, non-violent communication, interdependence, even differentiation. A lot of the themes, secure attachment, as a figure of eight between somebody else and myself, a co-regulation. But if that is out of balance, if I'm giving too much of my attention to somebody else at the expense of myself, my experience of that is that it's complicated. It causes needless complications. I'm thinking about, some of my relations that are professional relations where almost prematurely it's stepped into a social setting, and that has led to needless complication. That has felt like, this is out of the realm of professionalism. So in order to make, it feels like it's lacking safety.
Yeah.
I hope that's valuable for anybody listening who might be experiencing a kind of a lack of safety in a relationship.
Yeah, and the safety one is such an interesting question, because the 4 F's of survival, including fawning, where we're not fighting and we're not running away and we're not fainting and shutting down, we're actually staying in the relational space when we do the fawning behaviors, right? In order to stay safe, we start to try and regulate the other person. And then we feel safe. Now, this continues into our adult life, and it reminds me of comments I've heard hundreds of times where people say, I don't feel safe in that online forum, or I don't feel safe with my boss, or I don't feel safe with my friend anymore. And I sometimes query these comments when they come my way, because I want to know how much power the person is giving the other person. Because if I'm not a child anymore, and if I am completely reliant on the other person to feel okay and to feel safe, then I am assuming the position of the child. My own emotional safety is my responsibility to a certain degree.
Yes, I've heard you mention that before. There's something more in that to discuss. I'm aware that I'm a little bit short on time today, but I would really love to hear, and perhaps we could even use this to close, your test within the body. And if there is value, if there are people keen to hear more, perhaps you could continue with them.
I'll stay on the line a bit longer, but yeah, before you go, because I know you have to get it back in your car, and my wrist is getting a bit sore. Mel points out that I do need a stand, but this is not what we were planning, Mel. That the test is in the body. If I feel very tense in my body, if I feel stressed and anxious, I may be fawning. I may be in a survival response. But if I'm feeling relaxed and I'm genuinely open, which is to do with relaxation, and I'm genuinely curious about the other person's feelings and needs, then I'm probably more in empathy. So it's all about relaxation and tension. To me, that's how I tell the difference.
I love it. There's so much the body does really keep the score. And on that, thank you for raising such an important topic. I look forward to having a look at the comments, because this is a big one that I haven't come across before. So, Rachel, thank you again for your wisdom and experience. Listeners, please share your questions. Give us lots of questions, because you have a mind here to tap, and this is the perfect space to share those grey areas. So I look forward to jumping on later. And Rachel, again, thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
Okay, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
See ya. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I'll stay on for another 5 minutes or so, and I can check the comments and see if there are any questions or comments here. So Kasha says, trying to appease, hoping it would lead to love and acceptance due to fear of abandonment. This is so much what many of us learn earlier in life, that if I don't please and appease, I may be rejected or abandoned in some way. And therefore we learn quite unconsciously to please and appease. This is the fawn response, and we must honor that. It helped us avoid abandonment, but the cost is that we abandon ourselves. And eventually, if you abandon yourself, then, well, I think we all know the price we pay for abandoning ourselves. And we lose a sense of self-connection and who we are, and we maybe get exhausted. We may start getting depressed. When we disconnect from ourselves, we can end up with mental and physical health problems, and our relationships don't go so well. So lots of costs or potential consequences for abandoning ourselves. Now this is here we go. So Stephanie says, anyone I feel danger with, they're happy. If there's anger in their voice, it takes me back to being around my mother. That's a good point, Stephanie. We can get triggered back into that trauma response of intense anxiety and fear. And we may well go into one of the 4 F's of survival if we're re-triggered. So freeze, perhaps, is what you experience, just that freeze response in your body, or the flight response, you just want to run away, perhaps fight. But even though we get one of those other F responses, we may still find ourselves sometimes going back into fawn. It's as if fawn is a secondary survival response. Okay, now I'm frightened, and now I'm maybe a bit frozen, but I know what to say and do to kind of make this as right as I can, as quickly as I can, and then get out of there. So we can see how the 4 F's of survival can all sort of work together. But this is why I say the test is in the body, because it's in that state of tension, stress, and anxiety that we will know that we're not in true empathy for the other person, because true empathy for the other person is when we slow down, open up, and can apply genuine curiosity to our own or the other person's feelings and needs. And so that's where self-regulation becomes an important part of emotional intelligence, which was the topic of our workshop that I did earlier today with Alexis. So what else could I say about this? Joe says, for some reason I feel as adults kind of people who need to be constantly busy every minute they're awake. Yeah, so staying busy is, and doing, to sort of, it's a weird, yeah, it's a good observation, Joe, because it is a sort of a weird way sometimes of staying in the fawn response. If I'm just busy and productive, maybe then I'll be acceptable, and maybe then I'll, and it's also me managing how I see myself based on my earlier experiences. So much of this is of the fawn response is managing other people's perceptions of me, but even managing my own perceptions of myself, which is not really good use of my energy. I realized a few years back that when I stopped managing other people's perceptions of me, some people still like me and some people don't. But at least I'm more myself, and the people who do like me are seeing the real me, not the people-pleasing side of me. So what else have we got here? Janine says, victims of long-term abuse, then post-separation abuse, legal abuse, use children as pawns, have lived in constant state of fawn appeasement to survive the systems of abuse. Absolutely, Janine. I agree that this fawn response, the appease and please response, is the way that many, many people I know of have survived the systems that we live in. Our systems of living in some areas of of society are still abusive. And certain people can still be abusive who work in those systems. So I've done it myself, try and kind of hustle and please and play the game. So please don't get the message that I'm saying this is wrong to do this, just that we want to differentiate it from empathy. It's okay that we do this, but let's not confuse the fawn response with empathy. Was really the point I wanted to make in this live stream today, because they are different. All right, I'll see if there's one more comment and or question. And if there is not, then I will sign off for today. But thank you so much for joining us if you have. And apologies again for the technology. Last time Alexis was on the road and we did a live stream, she found it very easy to use the Zoom app on her phone. But today they'd changed the functionality of it and the button she was looking for was not there. Hence our last minute troubleshooting attempts. Next week she'll be back in her office and should be back to normal. I'll check the comments again later tonight. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. And if you're in Brisbane, we have an MVC yoga and psychology practice group next Sunday. If you'd like more information on that, just ask a question about that in the comments below, or go to Alexis's website, onenaturaltherapies.com.au. We also have a retreat coming up in November, the details of which are on the One Natural Therapies website, also on the North Brisbane Psychologist website, on our events page. And one more workshop in our emotional intelligence series in August. The details are on both of our websites about that as well. And you don't have to have come to the first two workshops to join in on the third one. So feel free to come along to our August workshop here in Brisbane in Graceville as well. Okay, well, thank you for joining us on this interesting topic, everybody. And we, Alexis and I, will see you again next Sunday online at 5. Okay, bye for now.